let's go back to our recipe app database diagram. What we've got a recipe that has a title and description, and that works, and that's great. We now have to create models for ingredients and a model for steps. And we know that the association between these models are that a recipe has many ingredients and a recipe also has many steps. So the reason why this is unique is we don't know, not all recipes have the same amount of ingredients and the same amount of steps. If we did, it would be fairly easy to build out the associations, but because we want to be able to dynamically tell the app, specify, this one has 6 ingredients, but this recipe only has 4 ingredients. We want to be able to do that, and so to be able to do that, we're going to have to use what's called a nested model approach. And thankfully there's several gems that will do this for you. The one that I'm going to use is the nested form fields gem. And the reason why I'm using the nested form fields gem is because it works. It worked. The other 2 gems didn't work the way that I wanted it to. So we're going to go with this one. So, and it's also supported, right? So an important thing when you're looking up Ruby gems is to see when the last commit was. And our last commit was about 2 months ago, and so that's, sorry about that. So that's a good thing because it means it's supported. So what we'll do is we're going to add the nested form fields gem into our gem file. So we're going to jump back down to our gem file. And after Bootstrap SAS, we're going to add nested form fields. We are going to do bundle install to install that gem. There it is, using nested form fields. And then we're going to restart our server again. Okay, so nested form fields documentation isn't great, but it is a good start. It'll be a good start. So what we'll do is we'll complete our installation by adding our require nested form fields in our application.js file. We want to do that after Bootstrap sprockets. So we'll add require nested form fields. So our installation is complete. So now we've got a let's go through some of the usage. We need to create a model for ingredients and a model for steps that essentially do the same thing. So what we want to do is we want to okay, so there's a couple things that I found to be helpful, and that was this is a different gem. The cocoon gem, I just couldn't get it to work properly, but but I found their documentation to be much better, and so we're going to follow some of their documentation. So what we're going to do is we're going to generate a model called, we'll go back to ingredients. Okay, so we'll generate a model called ingredients. And actually it'll be called just ingredient. So we want to keep it singular, and the singular and plural actually matters quite a bit. So what we'll do is we'll do Rails G model. So that's a shorthand for Rails generate model. We want to create a model called ingredient, and our ingredient is going to have content. That's a text variable, and our it's going to belong to a recipe. So we're going to do recipe belongs _to. So that's going to create automatically create an association between ingredient and recipe. So we're, again, Rails G model, make it big for you. Ingredient, content, text, recipe belongs to. So we'll create that migration, and then we'll do a rake db : migrate. So we created that table. While we're at it, we might as well do our steps. And so we'll do Rails G model, Rails generate model, step. And our step has a variable called direction, that's text, and recipe belongs to. So again, it's going to belong to recipe. It's going to automatically create that association for us. So we'll do rake db migrate. So we've just created our tables for ingredients and steps. So if we go back to our app in Sublime Text, we can see, let's close out of some of this stuff. We can see if we go to models, we'll be able to see ingredient is created and that belongs to recipe. Step is created and that belongs to recipe as well. So we added the belongs to in the model migration, but we didn't. It doesn't automatically have the add the has many association. So if we go back to our database diagram, we know that ingredients belong to recipes, but we need to also declare that recipes have many ingredients. So to do that, we'll do has. We'll go into our recipe.rb, our recipe model file, and we'll do has many ingredients. And then we want to copy this, accepts nested attributes for. So it accepts nested attributes for ingredients. And we'll do allow underscore destroy true. True. Let's word wrap that. Okay, so accepts nested attributes for ingredients, allow destroy true. Okay, and then we also want to add this little bit of code, dependent space destroy. Basically what this will do is if we delete a recipe, all of the ingredients will get deleted along with it. And so that's just something Rails needs you to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this entire bit of code and I'm going to paste it again. And I'm going to just change ingredients to steps. So has many steps, accepts nested attributes for steps, allow destroy true, dependent destroy. Okay. So that we've set up our model associations, we're good to go there. One thing that's missing is what we do with our controller file. So if we go to controllers and recipes, essentially when you are setting up any model association or setting up any new gem or setting up any new functionality, you have to think about the model, the associations between them, the views, what the end user is going to actually view, and then the controller, the interaction, the interactions, and what the end user sees when you click certain things. And so in our controller, we want to go to the bottom, and this is called whitelisting. If you don't whitelist variables, Rails doesn't like it. It's just to keep your app safe. So it allows, or it stops people from being able to just create random variables in your app. And so what we want to do is we want to add to our permissions. We want to add we want to add ingredients attributes colon, and then in our brackets we want to add we want to allow the ID, we want to allow the content, and we want to allow underscore destroy. We want to be able to delete ingredients attributes. Then after that bracket close, you want to do a comma, and then you want to do the same thing for steps. Step attributes colon, and then in brackets we want to allow the ID, we want to allow the, and this is where our model comes into play, direction, we want to allow to destroy. We want to be able to destroy it. Okay, so we're just allowing these variables to be added to our model. Okay, so that's our controller. Let's close that. We fixed our model. Let's close that. Now let's take a look at the actual views. So now that we've got our infrastructure set up, we actually have to add them to our form, right? So we need to allow our users to be able to actually add ingredients and steps. So we want to go to our views in our recipes, and we want to go to our form. And after our title and our description, I am going to, and this is HAML, H-A-M-L, which is a little confusing, but I'll do my best to kind of translate for you into ERB in Ruby. So what we'll do is we'll open up a Ruby tag. So to open up a Ruby tag, we do the caret percentage symbol equals, and then we're going to use this helper, nested fields for. So we'll do form.nested fields for. And nested fields for ingredients, do, and then we'll create our loop, ingredient. Then we'll close our Ruby tag. And since this is a loop, we're going to end the loop at some point here. And so I'm just going to add this end loop so we don't forget to. It's similar to HTML where every tag must open, must close. It's a similar rule. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to add our text field. So we can add our text field, and we'll do ingredient, and we add it. We're starting with the word ingredient because we're defining our variable here in our loop. We could define our variable as anything. They define it as FF. You could define it as Joe, and you would add, this would be Joe instead. But that wouldn't make any sense. It makes more sense to use semantic code. So we'll define it as ingredient dot text underscore field, and then ingredients. Oh no, I'm sorry, not ingredients. We want our actual variable. So again, we can go back to our model, and our variable is called content. So we'll just do text field content. And then this bit of code, remove nested fields link, is a nice little helper. It will create some JavaScript that will allow you to remove, if you don't like the ingredient that you just created, remove that ingredient. So we'll open a Ruby tag, and we'll say ingredient dot remove nested fields link, and then we'll close that Ruby tag. Okay, so that's our loop. Outside of our loop, we also want to be able to add an ingredient. So this is for each ingredient. we're going to add our content and we can remove it, but we also want to be able to add this entire loop again. So if we want to add that, we can use this helper add underscore nested underscore fields underscore link. And what we can do is we can open up a Ruby tag, add nested fields link, and then we want to add it for ingredients. Okay, so let's see if this worked. I bet it doesn't, because it never works out that way. There we go. So I like it when I make mistakes because you can see how I fix them. So we know that the mistake is in our controller. So we're going to go back to our controller, into our recipes controller. And we know that it's, it's actually not in our controller. It's in our class recipe application record. So that tells us it's actually in our model. Where is that recipe? Our recipe model. I'm going to word wrap. It doesn't like line 3, and it could be, let's see why, unknown key dependent. So it doesn't like this dependent destroy. We don't want to put dependent destroy on the nested attributes. We want to put the dependent destroy on the actual main association. So I just put this in the wrong spot. So we're going to move this bit of code up to has many steps, dependent destroy, has many ingredients, dependent destroy. So again, if we destroy our recipe, we're going to also destroy the ingredients and the steps along with it. So let's see if that fixes it. Loading, here comes the moment of truth. And it didn't. So let's undefined method add nested fields link. And I think I know why that is. So again, I like to show you, I like that this is happening so we can see where this problem is happening. And so what's nice is it'll tell you where the file is. So it's in our form.html.erb. So we'll go to our form.html.erb, and it tells you on line 29 that's where it doesn't like it. So right there. And I think it's probably because it needs the form attached to it. Form.add nested fields link. Let's see if that worked. And there it is. Okay, so it works. So make sure that you've add that prefix form to the add nested fields link helper. And again, we're using form because we've defined at the very top form. So if your scaffold generated an F here, sometimes it generates an F instead of a form, you're going to have to change all of these prefixes to Fs instead of forms. Okay, so that worked. Let's see if we can actually add an ingredient. So new recipe, or actually let's go back and edit our pizza recipe. Sauce, cheese, pepperoni. And we're going to update our recipe. And it's not showing up, which is to be expected. But if we go back, we can see, and we go to the edit, we can see if it saved it. And it actually did save that data. So the data is being saved. That's a good thing. Let's see if we can, the removing works. The removing seems to work. If we update it and we edit again, we can see it did save that data. Okay, so our form is all set up. And just because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, I hate the way that this looks. So let's go to Bootstrap, and if we go to Bootstrap Forms, we can see that form group will give us optimized spacing. So instead of div class field, we can change these to div class form group. I'll create a div around our ingredients. So that should help with spacing a little bit. And we can actually add a class to each of these text fields called form control. Right there, form control sets the width to 100%. So if you find your form fields, if you do at the very end a comma and then you do class, this is how you add a CSS class, form control. So I'm just going to copy that and I'm going to add that to all my fields. So my text area, my content field. Great. All right. So at least we've got a little bit better spacing. What else can we do? I'm going to take the form control off our nested field for now. And I am going to just kind of leave it like that. I think that's good. Okay, so that works. So the next thing is when we are looking at our show page, our ingredients aren't actually showing up. So let's go to our show page. So after our title and description, let's add our ingredients. So to add our ingredients, we need to pull up the variable that's being stored, and that variable is content, right? So we're going to do a for each loop, which is a pretty common programming loop. So what we'll do is we're going to open up our Ruby tag, and you can remove the equal sign if the bit of Ruby code is not going to actually appear on the page. The equal sign is basically the print function or command to make sure that it actually shows up on the page. So we'll just do caret and then a sorry, brain fart. Caret and then a percentage symbol, and we'll do for ingredient and we need the @ symbol on our show page to define the variables. So for ingredient in content at the recipe. For each ingredient in all of the recipe ingredients, recipe.ingredients, we want the ingredient content. That should work. There we go. Okay, so that was a brain fart. Sorry about that. So basically what we've done is we're looping in our ingredients. So if we add another ingredient, sauce, cheese, we update, we should be able to, that should be just fine. Great. So let's do the same thing for the steps of the recipe, and then we'll be done with this section of the tutorial, and then we'll move on to images next. So what we want to do is we're going to take this entire form group and we're going to paste it right below. Add some spacing. And so instead of nested fields for ingredients, we're going to change this to steps. We're going to change our variable declaration to step. So we want step.textField, and back to our model diagram. It's called, our variable is called direction. So we want step remove nested fields link, and then form add nested field link for steps. So we basically removed all instances of ingredients with steps, and we also changed our prefixes because we changed our variable declaration to step instead of ingredient. Okay, so that should work. Let's refresh. Go back to the add, and we can add our steps, which is great. And that worked. Step 1, roll the dough. I don't really know any of. Step 2, put in oven. So update. Again, it's not going to show because we haven't added it to our show page yet, but let's edit it and see it's saving the variables, which is great. One thing we might want to do is we might want to add a header for each of these, right? So add ingredients and a header for our steps. Add steps. So that'll help us differentiate our form fields. So steps is working. Let's change our show page and let's display our steps now. So we want to open a for each loop, so for each step in the recipe. So for each step in recipe.steps, we're going to, instead of a UL, we're going to do an OL, an ordered list, because we want to number them because they're steps. So we want to print step dot direction. So we want each direction printed out in a list item, in an ordered list item. And so I'm going to leave that up there for a second so you can copy it. And when we refresh and update, it works. And what we're seeing here now is an interesting problem that I didn't know was going to happen, but it's a good teaching point. Basically what's happening is a new unordered list for ingredients and a new ordered list for steps is being created for every time we add a step or an ingredient. And that's because we've accidentally put our OL and UL tags inside of the for each loop. And so it's looping, it's creating an entire, for every single step, it's going to create an entirely new ordered list. So what we want to do instead is we want to move our ordered list outside of the loop. I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. So we're going to move it outside of the loop. We're going to move our UL outside of the loop as well. And now the only thing in the for each loop is the list item itself and not the actual entire list. So now when we refresh, we're in good shape, right? So we've got normal spacing, and we've also got 1, 2, and if we edit another step, put in the oven, eat, it shows up. Okay, so we're in great shape. We've got an index that's showing all of our recipes. We can view our recipes. We can add, dynamically add our ingredients and our steps with our nested model. So what we're going to do is we're going to commit these changes. So git add a created initial app that allows for nested ingredients and steps. And we're going to push that up to our repository. So now we've got this saved in our GitHub repository. If something goes wrong at some point, we have this committed in a specific place and time, and we can come back to this. So this is where we'll stop. We'll take a break, and then in the next video we will add the ability to add images.